Welcome to the Moon Baby Magic Podcast, a space to honor women's rites of passage stories. From menarche to menopause, the initiations of womanhood all live within our wombs. We are here to reclaim the sacredness of all of them. I'm your host, Natalie Elliott, birth keeper and women's coach specializing in womb wellness and hormonal healing. Ready for slow and sacred storytelling? Let's dive in. Hey, women. Thank you so much for being here on the Moon Baby Magic podcast. My intention in everything I do at Moon Baby Magic is to support women in coming home to the sacredness and power that lives within their very bodies. So if you'd like to go deeper, a few resources for you. You can follow me on Instagram. I love to connect with women there. You can get the Womb Cycle Spotify playlists, your period prep guide, book an in-depth one-on-one virtual session, or shop herbal goodies. All of these are always included in the show notes of every episode, and I hope that they support you. Thank you. Let's get on to the show. Welcome back, lovely women. Today on the podcast, we have my friend Houyem. Houyem is a mother who is really changing up the cultural narrative of how we move through rites of passage, and she's modeling the same for her children. Through Houyem's stories of her first bleed, her time on birth control, and then finally owning her fertility, to her pregnancies and sacred postpartums. Seriously, you'll want to hear about the wonderful care Houyem receives from her mother and mother-in-law. And now as a mother to a coming-of-age girl looking towards perimenopause herself, she shares how she has come to normalize and sacred-ize each turn of the wheel within her cycle and her larger life cycle. This is a sweet and deeply inspirational episode, so let's dive right in. Hi, Houyem. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Well, as you know, the first question I ask everyone is to share what phase of life you're in your larger life cycle, and also to share what phase of your cycle you're in. And since we did the Blood Mystery School together, I know you have the same language as me. So go ahead and share.
Yeah. All right. So I'm full on in my mother phase. I'm a mother of 3 children of almost 10, 4, and 2. And in my menstrual cycle, I'm right now in my sorceress. So my inner fall, I'm day 24 of my cycle. And actually, that's my favorite phase of the cycle. It hasn't been always the case, but I just love this phase right now.
I so feel you. I'm on day 21 right now, so I'm also
Oh,
in my
wow.
sorceress. And I do, I feel the same way that like for a long time, I think my like follicular maiden inner spring was my favorite. And then now I just love the sorceress phase.
Yeah, definitely. I just love I don't know, the rawness of it. I feel it feels raw. It feels, everything is very clear. I feel when things feel right, it just feels right. And when it doesn't, it's so clear for me. Yeah, and of course, before I think I was probably a little bit overwhelmed by all the emotion that phase can bring. But I just feel like right now I'm just so, I think, in tune with my cycle and where I am in my life that I just embrace it all. And it feels great. I love, especially the rawness and the emotions. If I feel like I'm, I want to cry, I'm not gonna hold it, right? I'm just gonna have a good cry and, move on, right?
I
Yeah,
love
so
that.
yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, for women listening, if they don't know, this is the premenstrual time. So from after you ovulate until you bleed, I always call it the realm of the sorceress. Like it sounds very magical in that way. And I think if we're not committed to like witnessing ourselves through whatever process is coming up, or if we're not willing to change and shift, then this phase can be really hard because it's like a very dynamic phase. And I think for me, it requires me to be like shifting my energy and changing my energy. And like you said, like if the cry is coming up, to not like stifle it, but to let it through.
Yeah.
The element of the sorceress is water. So of course there's going to be this element of tears and emotion. And I also think, you know, there is something, some women really deal with like some like very physical issues in this phase. And so that can be hard. And so that's part of what you said, like you're in tune with your cycle. It's like when you're in tune with your cycle and you have like a healthy cycle, it can be a really beautiful phase. So I'm happy that's the case for you.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a very interesting point. I think in my work with women, I see a lot of women suffering during that phase because of all the physical symptoms that can, be very, intense during that phase. And I feel that, yeah, the first thing to do is to really deal with all the healing that needs to be dealt with during that phase. And I think once we clear all of that, we're able to truly appreciate that phase for all that it brings us, without all the physical health concerns that it can bring, when the
Yeah.
cycle is not necessarily optimal. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you often see like women dealing with in that phase?
Very intense PMS, I would say, different types, of PMS, and often, it's a lot of it also goes hand in hand with emotional, intense emotional PMS symptoms as well. It's not only physical, right? But it could be, from bloating to really, really intense anxiety, for example.
Mm,
Yeah, so when we're able to really deal and heal that, I think it really clears the way for this intense, but in a positive way, I would say, this intense phase of our cycle,
yeah.
where, yeah, everything comes into the surface, and we're able to really grab and deal with things before the next cycle.
Yeah, and like deal
Yeah.
with things before our bleed too, because
Mm-hmm.
you know, before I really learned a lot about my cycle, I feel like I was always working out my issues while I was bleeding. Like I always had to like work through so much, and that phase was so
Yeah.
intense until I realized like, oh, I can do this before I bleed.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes, it changes everything, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
you can fully be in your winter and rest and just, everything is calm, nervous system is calm, body is at peace, and you can just go into your, winter in a comfortable place. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's so true. And you know,
Yeah.
something I've been reflecting on too is like, you know, I often talk about resting on your period. I talk to women about this a lot and the importance of it. And it's like, you could be physically resting, but if you're not like emotionally and mentally resting, like you're still going to have like stress hormones running through your blood, you know? And so I think that like working out sort of like the issues, I guess that's the best term I have for that right now, working out the issues in the sorceress luteal phase really helps you be able to have that like mental emotional rest when you bleed too, I think.
Yeah. 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 I totally agree with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, I'd love to just get into your story. So I love to ask women about their menarche, their first bleed. So if you want to take me back and tell me how that was for you, if you remember it, like whatever you want to share with that.
Yeah. 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 I remember it very clearly. So I was 10 years, sorry. I was 10 years old only. I think 10 years and a few months. So I was
Oh,
very
that's
young,
young,
right?
really young.
And I knew what it was, but I did not expect it that young. And I remember that, that young. Yeah. So I was in my house and I was reading or studying for school, and I went to the bathroom, and this is where I saw some blood on my underwear. And it's kind of was in a phase where no, it can be true. This is not what I'm seeing. It can be true. So I just removed my underwear, put it in the washing machine, put another one, and just forget about what happened. In my head, I was like, I'm just gonna forget about what
No.
I saw. It's not possible. Yeah, so I was like, no. Um, and it's not like I had a conversation, with my mother about it. I knew exactly because my sister is 5 years older than me, so I knew what it was because I've had conversations, etc. But it's not something that I was expecting. And then 4 hours later, go back to the bathroom and I see blood again. And I start to cry. I go to my mom and I'm like, Mom, I have blood in my underwear. And then she gives me a hug She's like, that's okay. We go to my room, and then she started to explain to me what it is. But it was, I don't know, maybe a 20-minute conversation, I would say. And here are the pads, and this is what you're going to do every month. And that's it. That's the end of it, right? There was no other conversation than that. And, it was something, it was kind of, normalized by my mom, saying, look, it's very normal, all women have it, and your sister had her period as well. And this is what's you're gonna go through every month, and that's the end of it. And I think my whole teenage years and until my 20s, I really felt that my period was a nuisance for me because I couldn't go to swim at school, and I felt like I had this, I had to go change my pads, and I really feel, and I had cramps as well. I had physical discomfort, the first couple of days of my period. So I really saw it as a nuisance for me, my whole teenage years. And I really felt at moments that I wanted to go deeper and ask questions, but I didn't feel that I had the space to do that. And I never had any other conversation, with my mother, my sister about that. So that was, the end of it. So yeah, quite intense in a sense, but yeah, very normalized, but yeah, didn't really allow me to appreciate that phase, or learn to at least love it, all of my body.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think, some women that I've interviewed like do have a lot of trauma around this, but for most women, it's not like trauma. It's more like it just wasn't like honored. It wasn't like
Yeah,
really like talked about. And so there's this like sort of, well, what do I do with this now? And like that, I think that does lead to that idea that it's just an inconvenience. It's just this thing that has to happen because, if you're just thinking like this blood shows up in my underwear once a month, but there's no like understanding of why, it's like, okay, what's the point of this then?
exactly. This is what, for me, in my head, it was, this is what women have to go through. And I have brothers, and they don't have that. So why I have that while my brothers don't have to go through all that trouble? So for me, there was no understanding on that, right? So for me, it was this, oh my God, every time my blood was coming, I was like, again, and all that for 3 or 4 days,
Yeah.
and every month, right? Yeah. So there was no, understanding that of, the beauty of it at all. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I had the same thing, I remembering it. It's like every time my period came, I was like, ugh, my period's here, like
Yeah.
as a teenager, just so annoyed. And it's like, what if, I always think about this. I'm like, what if the girls were taught that like this is their power? And like just the visual I get is like thinking of, the fact that our blood is our fertility. Like it's what allows us to create. And even as a young girl, like that can be so magical to think like I have this special thing, this power within me. And that's like a unique, amazing thing that I get to have because I'm a girl, and not like this inconvenience thing that boys don't have?
Yeah, definitely. And this is, I have, my daughter is turning 10 this year. And it's definitely something that we've been, talking about. And I'm even putting in place a circle for her and her friends as well, to really go through all of these, fun, and, for them to learn what is going to happen, and, the beauty of their bodies, and that, there is nothing to be afraid of, nothing to be ashamed of. And this is, one of the girls' superpower. So I'm really excited about this. And I really, I think it's up to, us mothers to really change the narrative around our blood.
I agree. So this circle, I mean, that's so amazing. I love hearing when women are like teaching their daughters this stuff because, it's like when I think about a lot of us who didn't get this education, it's like, well, our mothers didn't either. And so somewhere along the way, like someone has to decide. And, for your family, like you're that woman. And Yeah, I'm curious. Did you say you started the circle or you're about to?
Yeah, I will. I mean, she knows because we have discussions, me and her, sometimes, and it's, very normalized, in our family. And she,
Yeah.
she knows a lot about birth, and she's been like around when I gave birth to her brothers, at home. So for her, I think, birth is very normal. She saw the postpartum support that I had, it's very normal. And of course, having, your bleeding is also part of a woman's life, right? But I really want to have this ceremonial, around it, with a circle. I think it will, makes it very special for her and her friends. So, coming of age girl of 9 to 12, and gonna come in the circle for a couple of weeks, and then just yeah,
Mm,
having fun and discussing around that. Yeah.
that's so exciting. Do you have ideas like are there certain topics you're going to cover or you're just going to talk about the phases of the cycle? Like what's the plan for that?
Yeah, I really want to go through each season
Mm,
and have discussion around each season. I want to incorporate as well art around it, and let them really allow them to have a space where they can ask questions, right? And I think this is what's missing. This is what was missing in my story, and I want them to be able to really have this space to ask any question that they want, or that they need to be answered, so that it doesn't stay in their heart, and they just live with that unanswered topics. So I really want hold space for them, and yeah, receive any question that they might have.
yeah, how amazing to like have a safe adult that they can ask these things to, like that. That's so special that you're offering that to your community. And it also it makes me happy to just think of girls coming into their cycling years, knowing that they have different phases of their cycle. Because, just tying that into our earlier conversation about like PMS and the sorceress luteal kind of phase, it's like, I think a lot of the trouble women have in that phase is not realizing that it's normal for this like
Yeah,
emotion, like heavy emotions, like some inner critic stuff to come up. And they just think like, oh, like, why is this here? But if you grow up understanding like, oh, okay, this is the phase of my cycle where this comes up. And then pretty soon that'll be gone. There'll be another phase where I feel great. Like, how amazing to just grow up with that knowledge.
exactly. Yeah, this is exactly what I want to share with them, and this is also something that I do as well during my cycle, where I say, oh, I'm in my inner autumn right now, and I just feel like, sometimes a bit emotional, and that's totally fine. It's gonna be okay. Or when on my bleed as well, this is today I really, we're not going to do that. I really want to rest. I really want to normalize each phase of the cycle for her, and just discussing with her about what I feel and how it feels for me, right? So and sometimes she asks me then, is it painful, mommy? And is it, so we just, it's not something that I necessarily force, to have conversation. It's really very natural and organic, and I'm just here to answer a question, and then it leads to something else. And
It's
yeah.
amazing. Good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
you shared a little bit about menarche in those early years. And I like to ask women, if you're kind of to travel along that red thread through your womb stories, is there a point after your menarche that feels relevant to talk about?
Yeah, I think I went on that whole like disconnection until very late. I think until like a lot of women nowadays, but until my late 20s, early 30s, right? Where also I was on the birth control pill for years, because that's the
Mm,
thing you do, right? To
yeah.
regulate your cycle. And, so I was on a birth control pill, completely disconnected. I was working in a very also um, male dominating environment. And I was, for me, that was the definition of success, right? Working in a corporation and making money, and with a very, very masculine energy, right? And I mean, how I think that was the right, the normal path, because there was such a big disconnection, you know, with my womb, that my whole feminine side was completely buried, and I think I started to remove the layers. I would say in my end, end of my 20s, early 30s, when with my husband we were ready to start a family.
Mm.
And for me, again, it was like, okay, if you want to start a family, I want to get pregnant as soon as possible. So I want to know everything about my fertility, right? So for me, it
Yeah.
was a project, like every other aspect of my life, right? It was a project that I needed to to succeed, right? And this is where I read the book Taking Charge of Your Fertility.
Uh,
And yeah, and I think this is where I felt it's a mix of frustration. How come I didn't know about that until now? Like how come? How was that? We were not taught that important knowledge, right? How, as a woman, like a 30-year-old woman, this is the knowledge of my body is just something that I'm stumbling upon now, right?
mhm.
But in another hand, it was like, oh my God, it's another, I feel I just opened a portal to another world. I really, really, at that point, it was just not only for, conceive, but it was, a world of discovering who I am really.
Mm.
So, yeah, and I started, so I discovered fertility awareness method. And I was fascinated at that point. I was really fascinated by what my body can do. And I was charting my cycle and looking at my cervical mucus and taking my temperature. And every day I was like, my body is just amazing. I was just amazed, really. Yeah, so yeah, it was this really mixed feeling of, my God, amazing, like this is amazing, but like this is frustrating. Why? Like I've never had conversation with other women in my circle around that as well. I've never discussed about this. Everybody was on a pill,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Yeah, isn't that crazy that like, this is like the thing that all women have in common, and most of us don't grow up talking to our friends, our sisters about this, or if we do, it's like, ugh, I'm on my period, you know?
God, yeah, exactly. This is about that. This is just like this is the reasons. What do we do to make it the easiest possible with taking hormones, uh, by putting tampons so that we can do everything we want to do during our bleed and continue our life like like if nothing was going on.
Yeah,
It's now it makes me very, yeah, I think very sad still, and I still have really like a feeling of sadness when I think about that. And this is why really I I don't want my daughter to go through that, because yeah, this is such this is not this is crucial knowledge that every woman should not only know but grow up with, right?
I
It's not
agree.
something that you should discover at 15. Every girl should grow up knowing that and being like a normal part of her life, right?
Yeah, well, and I think, luckily that there is this growing movement of, I read something recently, it was someone on Instagram saying something like, oh, cyclical living is trendy right now. And I was like, you know what? I'm glad it's trendy right now because we need that. And I do think there's this growing movement of women like reclaiming their cycles and reclaiming what's already within as their blueprint for life. And I hope and my prayer is that this like continues on through the generations because honestly, when I think about it, it's like the reason we didn't grow up with this is because like society wanted us removed from it, like they wanted women to work the 9 to 5 job and have more productivity and not have as many babies and like all of that stuff, right? Like I think it was very, I don't know, intentional, but like on some level, maybe subconsciously intentional. And I think that we as women in this generation have really had to like dig it out for ourselves and go through hard experiences of not learning and not honoring our bodies in order to then be the ones to pass on that knowledge to the next generation. And Yeah, I hear you that like you discovered this information and it was simultaneously amazing and also like heart-wrenching because you're like, why did I not know this?
Mhm. Yeah, as you said, I really feel as well. It was a conscious effort to really disconnect us from our bodies because as everything, when you go through this rite of passage and it's like birth, in a very conscious way, I think you are another woman, right?
Mm.
It really transforms you completely. So um yeah, and you view things, completely differently in your life. So I think it would have been, yeah, another world if
Yeah. Well,
women
I'm just
had this knowledge. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I'm just thinking about it and it's like you kind of caught this information when you were going into your second rite of passage, right? Like pregnancy and birth and postpartum is kind of that second rite of passage. And so I think that's when a lot of women, like, I don't know, I'm like air quotes, catch it. They catch the knowledge of their body and they come into it. And then, I mean, for some women, it's actually even later. Some women don't really come into that for birth either because they're not, doing it consciously. They're going through the medical system. But how amazing to have the next generation of girls like come into that in their first rite of passage and just deepen it each one after.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sometimes, I reflect, I'm like, how would have my whole experience been if I knew that, when I was like 10 and 11? I
Mm.
think, and I really think that a lot of my life choices would have been completely different.
Yeah.
My field of studies and, of course, relationships, etc. A lot of things would have been completely different if I had this knowledge and this connection with my body, this connection with my womb early on, right? Rather
Mm.
than, 20 years later.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and it even
Yeah.
goes into, you said you were on birth control and it's like, birth control affects our choices. It's not, it really separates us from our true self and our true desires and kind of puts us in that like 9 to 5 grind lifestyle by design because we're just getting hormones, artificial hormones fed into us every day on the birth control pill. So like most women would make
Yeah.
different choices if they weren't on that.
Yeah, even with their partners, right? And the first
Yeah.
time I read about that, I was like, oh my God, was I on birth control when I met my husband? I was like, no, I was not. I
You're like,
made the right choice.
yeah, I've had people on the podcast talking about how like Amy, who I had on a couple episodes, talked about how she met her first husband on birth control and it it didn't work out. And I'm not saying that's everyone's story, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of women do feel that. And that's on like a very scientific level. It has something to do, I might butcher this, but it has something to do with like pheromones,
yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah, definitely.
senses that, yeah, deeper
The
connection.
way our hormones are triggered, of course, when we are not on birth control, are completely different. So yeah, our attractions, to people would be completely different. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah.
It is such a fascinating. I heard that like on a podcast. I think the podcast was called Wild and Awake. It's with this woman, Bridget Nielsen. And I heard an episode about like attraction on birth control, like very early in my like womb healing journey. And I was
Mhm.
just blown away. And of course it makes so much sense, but that's the kind of information that we're getting from like mainstream media.
No, not at all. Exactly, exactly. But this is so. But as you said, I think there is a move. I mean, I don't want to call it a movement, as you said, but it's just a reclamation. More and more women are, aware of that, and I see as well a lot of women, questioning hormonal birth control, and being more, wanting, at least having this willingness to be more connected with their body, and having this willingness to really be more connected with their menstrual cycle. And I think it's gonna slowly but surely change, the narrative around that. Yeah.
I think so too. Yeah, so it sounds like you really came into this information that your body is absolutely amazing when you were like getting ready to conceive your first. So tell me more about that. Like yeah, like tell me about your charting and getting to know your body and like getting pregnant. I'd love to hear more about that journey.
Yeah. So I think this is where we were ready to conceive, but I really needed some time to really understand my cycle and my body. So I was like, okay, we're not gonna conceive for a few months. I really want to understand my body, see my ovulation, and it's been a super interesting journey. I was super excited to chart every day, to identify my fertile window, know when I ovulated, and then we ended up conceiving quite quickly after. Was quite we're blessed to have quite easy journeys on that front for all my babies. So
Mm.
so I knew exactly when my babies were conceived, and I had a beautiful, first pregnancy the first time. We were living in Canada at that time, and for me, I mean, home birth was definitely not in my sphere, but we decided to go with a midwife in a birthing center, which was quite a pretty radical choice at that time for me, and where not necessarily for me, but for my circle of friends and family, right? Not to give birth in a hospital.
Yeah.
I think I was very lucky to find the midwife was very, very hands off, and barely did anything during pregnancy. And I had a beautiful, amazing, life-changing, transformative birth. Again, a very, very hands-off midwife. But I mean, it was very as well textbook pregnancy. I gave birth at like 39 weeks and 6 days. It was very, textbook birth as well. So I don't know, it would have been maybe a different story if I was over 42 weeks or other like variations of normal, but it was very, pretty normal.
Mm.
That, I mean, it was such a transformative experience as well. And I really feel and I really think that like finding the connection with my body before my pregnancy has really played a role in that, because I was very, I knew what I wanted. I was very clear on what I wanted for my birth. I was very clear of my vision, what I wanted for me and my baby. So I didn't want to lose that connection with my body. I really wanted to have no interference. It was transformative
I
first birth.
wonder if, yeah, I mean, it's so amazing to hear that. And I wonder too, like, do you think you would have chosen the like birth center midwife route if you hadn't learned the fertility awareness method?
um I don't know. Because because I wanted to conceive, I was already reading, about birth choices and preferences. So for me, even before that, I knew that I wanted something more, quote, natural.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think it just reinforced my preference. I think it made it more clear, and it made it, yes, more like stronger, I would say.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of it because it's like, when you start to trust, when you start to learn about your body and its cycles, you start to trust that things are happening as they're supposed to. And I would just imagine that would lead into trusting your body to give birth to a baby because you trust your body to ovulate every month.
Oh my God, I think there is a very, very clear link. And I think, I mean, there are even a study that shows that, even if we don't need a study to do that, but I think I posted it recently that says that um, menstrual bleed shame leads to like negative birth outcomes. So it has been,
Mhm.
there was a woman who did a scientific study and
Wow.
surveyed, I don't know how many women, and she showed that when there is some sort of menstrual shame or some shame around the menstrual cycle, these women tend to have negative birth outcomes, right? And I
Wow.
think, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
We don't really need a study for that, but and this is why I'm so passionate about that, and this is why as well I want my daughter and girls her age to have this connection with their body, for them to have the birth that they want to have, right?
Mm.
And I've been working with women in that field for the last 7-8 years, and often, unfortunately, what I see is that women going into pregnancy and having very, very little knowledge about their body, very little, because they go through the pill for 10-15 years, and then they want to conceive, they stop the pill, and then they get pregnant, and they have no connection with their cycle, no connection with their body, no connection with their pelvis, no connection with their womb, their cervix, nothing, right? So I mean, of course it is going to impact your choices in your pregnancy, and of course it's going to impact your choices in birth, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. It's like, I mean, the study you shared, it's like, I'm so interested that someone did that study. And it's also like, of course, if we think like, because what is menstrual shame? It's like, it's kind of like body hate. It's the opposite of self-love. It's like self-hate because you're like having this like, yeah, like uncomfortability with the natural processes of your body. And I'm not saying that's any woman's fault because, it's all dependent on her cultural context. But of course, you're not going to trust your body to birth a baby or like feel like that's amazing if you don't already think that the processes of your body that lead to getting pregnant and giving birth are amazing. That's actually when I first started attending births, I was quite young, like maybe 22 or something, or 23. And I was also a yoga teacher. And so I was really passionate about like getting women into their bodies and movement. And like what I came to realize, and I still do a little bit of birth work, but why I ended up in the fields like this mostly now of menstrual cycle awareness is because I realized like these women didn't have a connection to their wombs before they got pregnant. And I'm not saying you can't form one. Of course you can when you're pregnant, and a lot of women do. But I was like, oh, I need to start like a little earlier. And so that's how I ended up where I am now. And I think, yeah, it's so important.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is how exactly what I did as well. I started with birth work, and then I kind of, went backward. Like, I'm gonna start with fertility, I want to say, method. But then I like, okay, it's a tool, but it has to be larger than that. It has to be about menstrual cycle awareness, not just about FAM as a tool, which is an incredible tool, but and I think really starting from there, and starting early as well, will help women make, really reclaim their choices in every aspect of their life. And this is where, when I said it, this is when I started to remove the layers. I think you start removing the layers not only on your body awareness or menstrual cycle awareness, but in every every single aspect of your life, right? Your health as well, and then your health, the health of your family, and then what you eat, your food choices and water and everything, because yeah, you realize how much your body's wise and precious, and how much your everything is interconnected, your body, your mind, and you want to really protect the gift that
Mm.
we have.
Yeah, so well said. Tell me about your postpartum with your first. How was that?
Yeah, so I'm from Tunisian descent, so North African descent. So I was born and raised in France, but my parents, immigrated from Tunisia. And in North Africa, I'm very lucky that postpartum is still very sacred and precious. So I had my mother and my mother-in-law for, I think they stayed with us for 5 or 6 weeks, right? And they just took care of us,
Ah,
cooking. And I really had, I was taken care of, and learning to breastfeed, which was intense, and learning to like be a mother, which was intense, and getting off my maiden phase as well, which was intense, and everything else was taken care of. So yeah, that was beautiful to be yeah, supported, taken care of, fed.
mm,
Everything in the house was taken care of by these
wow.
two women, and it was beautiful. So yeah, I'm really lucky in that sense, that it was still very, very precious and very secret. And it's like, okay, you don't go out uh from the house for at least 30 to 40 days, and you have to rest, and they don't want you to stand up except to go to the bathroom, and so yeah, you're fed special foods, traditional foods. And so yeah, it was a dream. Yeah.
How absolutely magical. I just love to hear that.
Yeah, 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 this is, yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, I'm sure the women listening know this, but like postpartum is it is such a sacred time. And, in a way, like it's, postpartum is correlated with the same, like sort of energy signature as our bleeding phase and our menstrual cycle. And so it's like this time where like deep rest on a physical, emotional, mental level is needed. And so I can imagine to have two women like cooking you like warm, nourishing meals and like taking care of everything around the house. And are there like
Yeah.
certain Tunisian like special recipes or rituals or anything like that that you had?
Yeah, they are. And I think, they're all based on the same, it's really the same principle of, broth and, vegetables and meats and lots of spices. And,
Mhm.
I think it's all the same, I would say, yeah, the same principle, which is amazing, by the way, which is amazing to see that across the world, all the, traditional postpartum like rituals or foods are all have all the same thread, right? And it's just like around like warmth and putting socks on your feet so that you don't get cold,
Mhm.
um, and massaging your body, and so yeah, there are special recipes, but yeah, would be the same
Yeah.
principle that everywhere else, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that amazing that like pretty much every culture has some level of like warmth, rest, nourishing, hot foods. It's like, it's just like we know, women know.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we took it for granted for my third birth, because we're like, oh, it's fine. I prepared a little bit in advance, and my mother-in-law was supposed to also travel to support us. But we're
Mhm.
like, no, we'll tell you when when you come, because I think we're it's fine. We're lucky to have a nanny helping us as well
Mhm.
here. But so my husband ended up doing all the cooking, and my second son was only 2 at that time, and I think we really underestimated the present that he requested. So my husband was really, really busy with him, and supporting
Mhm.
him, and I think after 4 or 5 days, he just crashed. My husband got sick because he was up all night, supporting me and cooking for me and supporting my son. And then we called my mother-in-law, like, can you come? She's like, of course I'm coming. I think she came at the end of week 2 and, took all the cooking for us and supported us.
Oh.
But I think, yeah, that was amazing. But I think, yeah, we really took it for granted. We're like, okay, we
Mhm.
got this, we know we got this. But yeah, I
I
think,
think
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of pressure. I know that in sort of like the free birth world, and like the sovereign birth world, there's a lot of talk around like, oh, just you and your partner, just you and your partner, like don't let anyone into your sacred space. And I do get some of that. And I think it's an important like antidote to the typical Western culture where it's like everyone's in the hospital room, like
yeah.
immediately after. I actually on Instagram, I saw someone who gave birth in the hospital and like within like the first 12 hours it was like they were all dressed and the baby was dressed and there was like photos with all the extended family, and that's a little bit intense, right? Like that's probably a little much for
Yeah.
me at least. But I do think like it's a lot of pressure to put on just your husband to do everything. Like of course like you're going to be resting as the woman, but like having one person to take care of you, the cooking, the other children, the cleaning, like of course they're going to burn out. Like we need a village.
Definitely. And honestly, as I said, during all my years of like supporting women through birth and postpartum, this is what I always say when the couple are like, no, we want to be, by ourselves for the first week or two. I'm like, have at least a backup, someone that can really support you. If
Yeah.
after the first week you're like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've seen many couples, honestly, doing it by themselves and being fine after a couple of weeks or 2 3 weeks,
Yeah.
4 weeks. They all end up at a certain time requesting help,
Yeah.
because as you said, you can't put all the pressure on the partner, and asking to do all of this, and going through his all everything he has to deal with as well. And
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think men are really, meant to support us that way postpartum. Honestly, I don't think they're meant to support us that way and cook and take care of the other sibling and take care of like, us, because emotionally as well, there are a lot of things happening. So they
Mhm.
need to be our emotional support. And yeah, it's gonna last maybe for like a week or two, but then it's yeah, it's intense. So
Yeah.
yeah, I always tell couples like yeah, have some support.
Yeah, I think at the very least, like, when I think about myself, like giving birth one day, I think like having a postpartum chef, like to just like have someone handle all of the cooking, like that would free up so much mental space from both people and someone who knows, like what to cook for a postpartum woman. So you're not having to like have resentment towards your partner because he doesn't know to make
Yeah.
you nourishing stew, you know?
Yeah. I think the cooking is the most important part, the part that takes the more the time. As you said, if someone is really knows what are the needs of a woman postpartum and serves you like a nourishing breakfast and a stew and my God, that's yeah.
Yeah. Or like if, even if you can't afford a postpartum chef to like have your friends over to have a meal prepping party with you, like while you're pregnant, like that would be so fun.
Yeah, exactly. I have friends, who can support you, and of course we can also, do some prep in advance. Of course it's limited, but I think it can cover this first
Yeah.
intense few days at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, postpartum has been yeah. I mean, it's just the third one. We really we took it for granted, but it was a good learning experience. It was a good learning experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it gave you the wisdom to like now be able to advise other women that like, hey, you're probably going to want some
Yeah.
support, even if you think you want to be alone.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share about your other two births?
Yeah, so after I think after my first birth I really journeyed through really birth work, and this fast birth was very fascinating for me, and I ended up training as a doula
Mm.
and supporting birth in the system as well. And of course I went with my pink glasses thinking that everybody will have a transformative birth experience, it's going to be amazing, and of course as a doula I'm going to save them. I'm really I went into that work with my hero cape,
Yeah.
definitely here. And I will always remember the first birth that I attended, and I ended up crying at night in the parking of the hospital for a couple of hours before going home because of what I
Oh,
just witnessed.
I've been there.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very intense. And yeah, knowing that something was definitely wrong here, but I really didn't have the words, and the language around it. But I was like, can't be right.
Mhm.
We cannot possibly do that to women, right? So I continued journeying and really peeling again, the layers of, all my conditioning until I decided to free birth my son. So 2020, the whole COVID situation, I would say. I was supposed to have a home birth and to travel back to Europe, and I was feel I couldn't travel. I had to stay where I live, and for me, it was very clear that I was going to free birth.
Mm.
And again, another like I think, and I think it's the case for every woman, but of course, every birth has been a huge transformation for me, and it brought me so much. Of course, it brought me this beautiful human being to raise, but also for me, it brought me so much learning, and it really transformed the way I view myself and the way I view the world, right? So it really allowed me to again remove a layer, and again the birth of my other son, my third son as well, was also something else. I'm 2 years, almost 2 years postpartum, and I feel it's still bringing me a lot until now. So yeah, yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that like choice to really like take your your rite of passage into your own hands, and choose free birth and to, yeah, like honor that rite of passage as a sacred one because, it's not just the first birth that's the rite of passage. I think it's like each one initiates you in a different way. Do you feel like that?
Oh yeah, this definitely every birth has been such a really. I feel like I open a door and in another, yeah, I'm opening the door and I'm opening another world of possibilities. It's really how I see it. Every
Mm,
single birth has been the same for me, and I think really I was able to make those choices as well because of all these years. Of course, I continue my learning through, about birth, but also about myself, about my womb, about my menstrual cycle. And I really, every time I went through birth and then postpartum, and every time it took me around like 14 to 15 months to have my menstrual cycle again. And every single time when my menstrual cycle came back, I just cried out of joy. I was just so happy. And the last time, so my cycle, my cycle came back when he was 15 months. So it's just been five cycles now. Yes. I was so happy and I fell in love with my cycle a little bit more. Right? I was like, oh my God, she's back. And yes, it's been 5 months off again, going through my cycle and enjoying them a little bit more. And I'm 42 and my cycle has been very like, regular, but I know that I'm slowly going into perimenopause as well, and I'm really
mm,
excited about that. It's not something that I'm scared of. I'm really, really happy about that next phase of my life and to
mm.
be full into the sorceress.
Yeah, right. Like not
Yeah.
just to meet it once a month, but to really embody that archetype that you love.
Exactly.
So are you feeling, a lot of women that I speak to who are in their 40s, they like start to feel like a lot of women describe it as like the whispers of the sorceress. Are you feeling that a little bit
I, I
or not yet?
no, I really, for me, it's really now restrained into, my luteal phase right now. I just feel it just during that
Yeah.
time. But yeah, I can't wait to feel it even more and more. So yeah, for now, it's really just in my luteal phase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you, because a lot of women, when they think about going into perimenopause and menopause, it's like a scary thing, or it's something they just never think about at all. And, that's something I've had a few women who are in that sort of menopause time on the podcast. And I, I have made a point to really try to consciously learn about menopause before I get even close to that, still being in the maiden phase of my life. And, yeah. So what are there things you've learned about that phase that you're like preparing for, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I love the concept of, going into your second spring. I just love the idea. Um, I love I love as well the fact that it really encourages you to be more tuned as well with your lifestyle, making sure that you're, you have healthy habits around food and, things like that. So I think it's really, making sure that you are also in terms of movement and lifting weights and things like that. So I think it's more about, allowing me to be more in tune about my lifestyle in that sense, just to prepare, for that phase of my life, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really feel again it all comes to, a lot of women live with all these physical discomforts and do not unfortunately live with it and think that it's normal.
Mm,
And then unfortunately sometimes it accentuates and it aggravates, when you go into perimenopause and menopause. And I feel that if you really consciously um, make an effort to really heal your body and removes all these, physical discomfort, I think you can really, yeah, clear the space for all the beauty of that space.
I love that. Yeah, it's so true. And I think there's so much to it that's so similar to the phase in our cycles of the sorceress, where, when we have PMS, it's not like that's just randomly popping up in that phase of our cycle. It's like related to how we treated ourselves throughout the whole cycle. And so I think too, when going into and also in our luteal phase, it's a time where like we really have to double up on our self-care. And so I think, moving into that perimenopause, menopause, sorceress phase of life, it's like kind of a confrontation of like, how have I treated my body for the past, 40 years? And how can I slow down and really nourish myself through this time? And yeah, it sounds like that's kind of where your focus is. And I think it's beautiful and such an inspiration to other women, Even we were talking about how in our cycling years, like we don't often talk to other women about what we're going through, and like how wonderful for you to be, I would imagine one of your friends who's like, hey, let's talk about this next phase of life.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I really want to as well bring that to my community and create something around perimenopause.
Mm,
Because again, we don't talk about that often. We talk a lot about, of course, our menstrual cycle, which is important, but I think it's as much important to really show women that you can prepare, for that phase, and you don't have to go all through, of course, we hear a lot about hormone replacement therapy and all the medical system has now, all these hormones to support women and help women during that phase. And I think for a lot of women, they think that that's the only option, right? You
yeah.
take the pill, when during your childbearing years, and then when you go through perimenopause and menopause, you take again another set of hormones, and this is the
God, yeah.
thing that we have to do. This is I see that all the time when I hear most of the time when I hear about perimenopause and menopause, it's about that. It's about what medical system has to offer. We don't
Ah,
hear anything else.
it's so the way you put it with like we're on the birth control pill like all throughout our cycling years, and then in menopause there's like another hormone for us to take, like that just really hit something in me. I don't think I'd quite put it together in that way before, but like how absolutely sad that like it's like every rite of passage is like taken over by the medical system, from your first bleed, which has like, I always say that rite of passage gets like forgotten and replaced with getting on birth control. And then to like having a medicalized birth and being, that experience being taken from you.
Yeah.
And then to menopause being like, oh, this time that's like such a powerful, like you said, a second spring, like is like, oh, well, you poor thing. Like let's get you out of this pain and like put you on this hormone. It's so sad.
Yeah. This is so sad. Exactly. This is just so everything is just, there is just a takeover of our bodies and our experiences.
Mm.
And I don't think that many women go like nowadays go through all their rite of passage now, from menarche to menopause with no intervention of the medical system.
Yeah.
I would be curious to see that because I don't think, yeah, many women go through everything, in a very like in a non-disturbed way.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens with your daughter and her friends.
Yeah.
That could be quite magical. And
Hopefully,
just like,
yes. Yeah.
and just normal too, like it's sometimes, when women hear this kind of stuff for the first time, it might sound like radical or different, but it's like, I love to remind people that the word radical, like it actually means root, like the roots
Mm-hmm.
where we come from. And like all of this stuff, as women, our rites of passage, they all live within our bodies. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's not anything that we're making up that's outside of you. It's just like coming home to yourself.
Beautiful. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I really want her to really experience that as, normal. Like
Yeah.
for her, like, birthing at home is, very normal.
Yeah.
And I want her, yeah, to experience her like menstrual cycle as something that is, beautiful and normal and all this, rite of passage and rite of life, as you said, not something that is extreme. Oh my God, it's just, how it's supposed to be. That's it.
Yeah. How do you,
Yeah.
what are like some ways that you normalize bleeding and menstruation and the cycle in your house?
Yeah, so I really, as I said, I just talk about how I feel, and I would say, "Oh my God, I just feel tired today because I'm on my period," and then I just leave space. She comes to me and asks questions. I just, very open about that. And so I'm not necessarily, going to really, again, force any knowledge or force any like ceremony rituals or anything like that. But it's just about, telling how I feel and why, for example, I would tell her, oh my God, this day I feel super productive today. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. And yeah, I feel productive because I'm, in my ovulation and, it's very, so then she would ask question and yeah. And then, it will lead to another. And then a couple of days later, she'll be like, Mommy, you told me about that. And, can you like, and why is that? And so, so I really keep it very, again, natural and organic without forcing anything.
I love that. And that's the true way, right? Is to embody it yourself, because then she sees, well, this is just what mom does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. And the same for my boys are still very young, but I would do the same with my boys as well, just talking about how I feel and let them ask questions, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, it's been so wonderful to hear like all these different phases of your life and like where you've come to now. So if you just want to share a little bit about like where you feel like you are in your path now, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, where I am right now. So I've been supporting women through, as I said, through birth, but also through like menstrual cycle awareness and supporting, hopefully in the next couple of months, supporting girls as well, my daughter's age. And hopefully as well, I would love to put something around perimenopause to support women in my community around that as well.
Mm.
And yeah, all of that in, as I said, in my mother phase here, mothering three children full of energy and life. And it's, yeah.
Yeah, it's like full on, right? Being in that mother phase and also in the creation phase of like what you're putting out to the world. It's like a lot of
Mhm.
focus.
Yeah, exactly. This is where, yeah, I really feel, as I said, like full on into my mother. It's like everything is intense creation and, yeah, everything at once, but it feels intense, but in a positive way. It feels again, yeah, I love sharing with my community. I love sharing and transmitting as well my values to my kids and my family, and just taking care of them and embody really
Mm,
how I feel it should be, you know, for them to witness.
yeah. So amazing. Well, the last question I always ask the women on the podcast is if there's a piece of womb wisdom that you'd like to leave the women listening, what might that be?
I think I want to share that it's never too late to reclaim what it's yours, because we talked about, teaching young girls and, but I think it's at any point of your life, you don't have to be like, oh my God, I'm in my 40s, that's too late for me. And I think there is always time for you to, yeah, learning about our bodies. I really feel as women nowadays, it's learning about yourself. It's really reclaiming your own experience. So I think it's never too late to get that learning and to reclaim what is yours.
Mm. Yeah, so well said. I know women who learn this information, like after menopause, and it's still powerful information for them. And yeah, thank you for saying that because you can always come home to your body.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Houyem, I think people are going to be wanting to look you up and know what you're up to. So if you want to share where women can find you and all of that, I'd love that.
Yeah, you can find me on, so my Instagram is The Wise Wellness, and I have a website as well, thewisewellness.com.
Beautiful. All right, Houyem, well, thank you so much for being here. This was so wonderful to hear your stories.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the wisdom of the womb today. It's truly an honor to bring these stories forward, and it would mean so much to me if you'd rate and review this podcast so that it can reach even more women. If you're looking for deeper support, You can find the link to book a one-on-one virtual session in the show notes. See you next week.